Episode 17, Legendary Racehorse Scout, Jeff Seder. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Jeff Seder. Jeff is the founder and CEO of EQB, a consulting firm which advises thoroughbred racehorse owners. He utilizes proprietary big data analytics to predict the success of racehorses, most notably the 2015 Triple Crown winner, American Pharoah. He has his undergraduate, law, and business degrees all from Harvard, and he currently resides on a farm in Pennsylvania. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Well, if there ever was a career niche, I'd say being a racehorse consultant has got to be it. So how in the world did you get into this profession? You didn't actually grow up knowing you wanted to be a racehorse scout one day, did you?
No. I took a ride from a rental stable one day in May while I was in law school, or I guess, and business school at Harvard, and fell in love with horses and decided I wanted to do something that would with horses. And when I looked around for some place where I could actually earn a kind of living I wanted, it didn't seem there was anywhere but the racing. So I got interested.
So you've got these multiple degrees from Harvard. You've got the law degree, you've got the business degree. I read that at one point you were pre-med as well. Were all of these fields of study part of some grand plan? Or at the time in your life were you more or less struggling to figure out what kind of career you wanted to pursue?
Well, there was a change of heart.
Okay.
I started out wanting to be a psychiatrist, and so I was pre-med and took a lot of psychology courses. But then I decided that was because I wanted to know more about myself rather than be a psychiatrist. And I went off to a Peace Corps project in Africa for 2 years. I saw there that people needed jobs and skills, and I decided I was going to be an entrepreneur in Africa. So when I came back, I went to business school and law school. That was my road to what I thought would be, I call it an entrepreneur because it's with horses now. And my senior year, I guess it was a 4-year program. After 4 years of doing Harvard Law School and Harvard Business School at the same time, I kind of was burned out. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had to do a thesis combining law and business. And my thesis advisor was Archibald Cox from the massacre. Remember the Nixon thing, the Saturday Night Massacre or whatever it was. And so I had to go in there in like March of my senior year. I didn't even have a topic, and tell him how I was doing on my thesis. And I had nothing to say. So finally it was embarrassing. And he says, well, what are you interested in? And I kind of looked at the floor and said, horses. I thought he would kill me. And instead he turned around and he pulled this great big book off. His office, a famous guy like that, was in the stacks at Harvard, in the library, deep down in the middle of all these books and dust. Anyway, he pulls this huge book out and drops it on the desk in front of us, and the dust goes up in the air. And he says, this is the statute that covers horse racing in Massachusetts. It's a perfect combination of law and business. He says, I don't think anybody at Harvard has ever even looked at it. Why don't you do that? So I became obsessed, and I did. I went down to the archives in Boston, which is the capital of Massachusetts, and I went through the financial reporting for the racetracks and everything. I went to town on it, and I became fascinated. I got an A on the paper, and it kind of launched a career. But I didn't have any way to get into horse racing. I didn't have any connections. I didn't have the money. I didn't have any knowledge, really, or background. Too big to be a jockey. I didn't know enough to be a trainer. So I thought, well, what the hell do I know? But I knew modern business methods, and I had a really good, solid scientific education starter. And I thought, and when I looked at the industry, it was being run the same way it was 300 years ago. The management and the reporting at the racetracks was beyond bad, and the everything of what they were doing, picking and training horses, was 100 years old. I said I can make a contribution there. And then I was lucky enough early on. So I immediately said I was going to do that. And I went looking for luminaries in the field of exercise physiology and biomechanics and sport medicine, and also veterinarians, to help me design a program.
But let me just pause you, Jeff, for a minute there. I just want to make sure I captured something. When they asked you what you want to do, and you said racehorses.
Oh, I just said horses.
Horses. So maybe I'm missing something here in the background. Why horses? What was the fascination?
I had taken this ride in May at a rental stable with a date with a girlfriend, and then I thought it would be a lot more fun if I didn't have to worry about falling off. So I started taking lessons every day and commuting to the stable. And then I bought a horse. I just really fell in love with horses. And I wanted to do something with horses. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to do something with horses.
Well, you fell in love with the girl. and then subsequently, you fell in love with horses in order to get the girl. It's always about a girl, isn't it?
No, not really. I mean, she was terrific, but I fell in love with a horse.
That became the passion.
I'm an animal nut.
You finally graduate. You've got this double degree. What was the first job that you got out of school?
I went to Citicorp in Manhattan. And there was the go-go days of international banking, and they were the lead. Citicorp was the lead international banker. And I had come back from Africa. I did 2 years in Africa, and I thought I wanted to do something like that. So I went there. But I was only there. I only lasted about 8 months or so. They had a brand new building at about 50-something in Lex, and it had a huge atrium at the bottom with life-size mural all the way around it of Pennsylvania horse country. And one day I was sitting there looking at it and saying, "What am I sitting here looking at this? I could be living it." So I quit, and I started my company, EQB.
So, Jeff, when you left Harvard, you go to Citicorp, and 8 months in, you call it quits. What happened? What happened 8 months into this job that you decided this wasn't your career, it wasn't the company for you, it wasn't the life you wanted?
It was just, I was doing it for somebody else. I've been a high achiever. I mean, I always got A's and this and blah and awards. I don't know. I just spent so much of my life killing myself for somebody to give me an A in something. I just, screw it. I want to do something for myself. I just felt wrong. And I knew I said, "Well, what do you love?" I said, "I love horses. I'm going to go do it."
So before we get to the racehorses, there were some early lessons learned from some work you did with the American bobsled team back in the 90s. What was that all about?
I created a foundation to help Olympic athletes to do research. I was too naive to know that you couldn't do that. Nobody else got it done. I did. And then I got a connection to the U.S. Olympic Committee, and I teamed up with some of their scientists, and I started working with them. And our first job was for the bobsled. The bobsled team had never really been in medal contention, not even close. So they wanted to know why. So our job was to go film the East Germans and the Swiss and the people who were perennial champions and see what they were doing differently. Because everybody thought maybe it was our sled. And they were trying to get sponsors to buy them $1 million sled or from one of the other teams. They were recruiting really strong guys, like big-time football players, to push the sled because they thought they needed more stronger strength or something pushing the sled. But it turned out that was all had nothing to do with it, really. It turned out that you really wanted more like ballet dancers. You had to have guys on both sides of the sled coordinating, both putting their outside leg forward, then their inside leg. You had to completely minimize the wobble of the sled at the beginning because that teeny weeny wobble created friction. And at the beginning, what was a fraction of a second, by the end of the bobsled run was enough time to not even be in contention.
So paradoxically, the strength was actually a negative.
Yeah, they were jerking the sled around, and it was a negative. And then the very next competition, they were in the medal contention.
So you determined this by, I read that you had a slow motion camera.
Right. I had to get a slow motion camera up there, and it was an old fat with film that went through really fast. It was the old kind of special film, and we had extension cords. I fell out of the truck and broke my shoulder at one point. Plus, I was a varsity wrestler at Harvard, and we had the East German guy figured out what we were doing, filming his team, and he stood in front of our camera, and I got into a fight with him to get him the hell out of the way of the camera. So some of our data while we were filming the bobsled, with me and the East German coach were rolling around in the snow.
This is amazing. So here the U.S. is year after year getting these big, super strong athletes thinking that strength is completely correlated with speed, and actually it was working to their disadvantage. So when you go into something like this, do you go in with a hypothesis, or do you go in saying, I know nothing, I'm going to look at the data, I'm going to film them and just learn what I learn?
It's the latter. I found out early. That was one of the things I learned in the Olympic Committee effort. We learned that as different medically and mechanically as the normal is from all that data on pathology and disease and injury, that's as different normal is from elite athletes, how they're put together, what their problems are, the mechanics. And we have these huge databases on normal and on sick and injured, but we didn't have anything on elite athletes. And it was constant surprises. So we had to just start collecting data on muscle types and all kinds of things.
So you go in, you come up with, we've got to film these teams in slow motion. You see that there's a different body type that's needed.
A different technique, a different body.
Different technique, different body, everything. And then when you applied that to the U.S. team, did it work? Did we start winning medals?
Yes, they were in medal contention the first year. They were serious contenders after that with the same sled. That was an eye-opener for everybody.
So what's interesting is you were essentially a big data scientist decades before big data became a buzzword, before data scientist was even an actual profession. That's what you were.
Yes, that's right. It was 1977. I had to sneak up to the New York to Mount Sinai Hospital with these huge discs. And I had a friend who was a doctor there and put them on the computer at midnight and take them off before 7 a.m. to do my analysis of my data. IBM 360s filled up a whole room, had less power, as you know, than a laptop today.
Let's fast forward here to you're becoming a racehorse scout. Well, historically, these racehorse scouts more or less use the horse's pedigree, maybe its track record, its size, to predict future performance. But you felt that none of those alone were very accurate. So you come up with this insight that the size of a horse's heart, or specifically the size of its left ventricle, was a much better measure. That is, the bigger the left ventricle, the higher the likelihood of success for the horse. How in the world did you ever come up with that insight?
First of all, I knew that the eyeball and intuition and pedigree and all the other stuff, the confirmation that these guys were doing was crap, because 99.9% of the people in racehorses were losing money. I did my research. How much are they paying? How much do they earn? Who does what? And it was a disaster. It was a rich man's playground. It was not really a business unless you were cheating. So I said, well, we can do better. And so I started to look at everything. I did slow motion filming of them, of all ages, babies, chasing them down the field, champions at the racetrack. I did muscle biopsies, open muscle biopsies on champions versus regular racehorses. I had horses in swimming pools with masks we built, and we had to catch the gases and look at the gases. I looked at everything. And by the way, to catch the gases, we had to put the horse in a swimming pool in a sling and get his heart rate up. And then when we tried to catch the gases in a normal spirometer, it filled up in like 2 seconds. So we chained it with another spirometer and then another one. And finally we said, this is ridiculous. It's too much air. So we got a weather balloon to catch it all. And then we looked at each other and said, what is this? What's going on here? And we discovered that the horse was cooling himself like a dog panting, that the lung capacity had to do with cooling the horse as well as oxygenating the blood. So it was vastly bigger than it had to be for oxygenating. So trying to train the horse's lungs for like they do humans was a complete waste of time. There were insights like that. Anyway, I did everything, and I finally decided on the heart. I developed a heart rate meter, and I decided, no, I have to know more about their heart. There was a guy in Australia who was listening to their hearts and said he could tell the great racehorses. There was a guy doing EKG heart scores, and it was becoming popular. And he would measure the distance between the peaks and the little peaks in the EKG printout. And I thought, that's crap, because the speed of the little motor running the paper in the machine They're plugging it in anywhere in these barns, is being affected by the voltage. And then he's measuring the distance on the paper. I said, that's got to be lousy data. I have to have a better way. I'm going to measure the heart directly. So that they were doing it in hospitals with ultrasound. So I said, good, that's what we'll do. It turned out, how am I going to go to racehorses in barns and do that? So I took the first PCs there were, the Apple IIc, remember that? And I went to a defense contractor down in D.C. I found, and we wrote the code in machine language, and we built our own ultrasound machine from that. And we got a custom transducer because the transducer depths and megahertz was wrong. It wouldn't go deep enough. It wasn't reproducible. So we had our own ones manufactured, and we went and we did research on racehorses with that. Nowadays, you can buy that machine off the shelf. Once they realized what I was doing, people copied it. I should have patented it. Along the way, we created some technology that was patented that got bought by Johnson & Johnson, and one of them won New Medical Device of the Year in 1986 in Europe on a bone scanner. We were just looking at everything. I was measuring how much the poop weighed when a horse was on his way to the paddock to race and seeing if that related.
So you're looking at every possible.
Anyway, I invented this ultrasound machine, and then that data went in there. And then we tried to do it the way the equine cardiologist told us, and it didn't work. It wasn't reproducible. It wasn't good. So we ended up using a different transducer, going around to the other side of the horse, developing our own technique, which, by the way, now is standard, our own technique and our own markers in the heart and our own way of doing it, and we got it so it was reproducible. Then it still didn't work. And I said, what's wrong here? But you see that the pattern is that I had to let the data teach me. Everything that was supposedly true about racehorses, elite racehorses, was not right. They told me the heart rate of the horse when they were racing was maximum 120. It's 220 or higher. I had to learn that. Anyway, I realized looking at all this data that still didn't work. I'm still got a day job because I'm still losing money, and I'm spending all my money on the research. And I had a law and business degrees from Harvard. I could earn some money, but I was spending it all on research. Anyway, I realized the problem was that I was trying to compare colts to fillies to horses different ages or different sizes. That wasn't going to work. I had to have a database big enough where I could compare a 14-month-old filly that was, a certain height and weight only to other horses within that age, sex, height, and weight range. About 0.5% of racehorses become really good. That would be 1 out of 200. You may miss that for some reason. So you have to have really 1,000 horses at every age, sex, age, height, and weight category. And there's hundreds of them. I had to build a database of like 50,000 and more horses, go out and with reproducible stuff and get their measurements of their hearts. And then I had to go through it with multivariate discriminant analysis and look at 48 measurements. And then I found something very simple and you can do in 5 minutes, bang, and it tells you more precisely than everything else whether the horse will be a good racehorse or not.
So you had a lot of success along the way, but your claim to fame came 2013. You're consulting with a wealthy Egyptian entrepreneur, was looking to buy the next great racehorse at an auction, and you came along and advised him. Talk through what happened.
We started with him a few years before. He didn't know enough about racehorses to know that I was a nutcake. So instead of going, when he saw my stuff and he saw my background, he decided he was going to try working with me because he said, I'm new in the business. I don't have anywhere near the amount of money as some of these competitors like the Sheikh Mohammed. So I'm going to try and get an edge. And so by his third year using me, he was the leading racing stable in the United States, spending a lot less money. He'd already had champions and stallions, etc. So it wasn't like I hadn't proved myself with him. We bought this one horse, the Dam, the mother of American Pharoah, and she got hurt in her second start. So she was one of our super duper physicals. And we participated in getting him a stallion the same way. And he mated it to when he got American Pharoah. Everybody says they knew and they knew blah, blah, blah. They didn't know. Nobody knew who he was going to be really. But we knew he was about off the scale on what we were trying to measure. At that point, there was the Arab Spring, and all his money from Egypt got frozen. So he needed money. So he put the horse in the sale, and then I was at that sale to find him horses. And I came back and said, I'm not going to earn any commissions, because I'm going to tell you to keep your own horse. Don't sell the horse. Sell your house. Don't sell the horse. That was the quote of the day. June 5th in the front page of the New York Times, the day before he won the Triple Crown, was that story. It said, sell your house, don't sell this horse. So he didn't.
Because you saw something in that ultrasound that was an anomaly, essentially.
Absolutely. That's the other thing. People don't, sometimes the vet, I know one vet turned down the horse. They had a chance to buy American Pharoah. His heart was too big. And I said, they don't know. They don't have the databases. Yes, it was huge. But the point is it was all balanced and everything else, it fit with the spleen and the whole cardiovascular system. The heart was not diseased. It was just big.
It's an incredible story. I mean, there hadn't been a Triple Crown winner, I think, 37 years. And this horse not only did it, but he did it practically setting track records. And then he went to the next $1 million race and blew everybody away there. And then he went to the World Championships and he won that too. No horse has ever done that. No horse has ever done that. And then I read somewhere, they said, well, he did it on Lasix. It's like Barry Bonds on steroids. It's not, because every single horse now, like 98% of them run on Lasix, 99%. So all the competition is on Lasix because people think it helps. It helps keep their lungs clear. It helps keep – the point is everybody's on it. Barry Bonds, not everybody was on steroids. And besides, he didn't even need it. He wasn't a bleeder. It was just some ridiculous thing because it's kind of – there's so much myth and nonsense and superstition in the racehorse business. I always said if I ever personally own the horse that wins something like the Triple Crown or the Kentucky Derby, I'm going to stand in the finish in the winner's circle and hold up a bottle of Tabasco sauce and say, I put it on his ankles every day. Right. So, Jeff, is it all about the data? Is it just numbers on a spreadsheet? How about personality traits like grit or competitiveness? Do those qualitative attributes get factored in?
Yes, there's noise in the data because there are no free agents. And if they don't want to win, and if they're going to slow down when they get tired, it doesn't work. And I think that's why we can't be right all the time. Going back to Lorenz, the classic original animal behavior book on aggression, you can try and figure out the dominance of the animals. I rode racehorses. Along the way, I did every job. I mucked stalls. I was an exercise rider. I managed barns. I live on a farm. I bred horses. Some horses, when you ride them, they will, and I was strong. I was a good wrestler. They'll pull your arms out of your sockets because they want to be in front of the other horses when you're out exercising. Other horses don't give a damn. Yeah, it's important. So a horse like Secretariat, nobody had to hit him. He would die before he was going to be second at the end of that race. So that's important, but it's not enough. It's not enough. So if I get a guy 5 horses that are physically capable of being champions, I know that at least a couple of them are going to be competitive. They're going to want to do it. 3 out of 5 probably won't.
So now that the cat's out of the bag, in terms of your secret sauce here, what's to stop all the other racehorse consultants, all the other scouts out there, from incorporating the same kind of data into their own assessments?
I say it this way. I can give them the instruction manual and the violin, but they ain't going to play a symphony right away. I got a technician who's been doing it for 10 years, 50,000 horses, and it's reproducible. I have the databases to know the difference between a 16-month-old 1,000-pound filly and a 17-month-old 1,100-pound colt. They don't. They got to wing it. Plus, that's not the only variable. It doesn't do any good to do the technical stuff right and the basics wrong. And I've got such good people, and I'm connected to such good trainers and things. It's just as important that the traditional expertise of how the horse should be managed and raised and fed and how he's put together. All those things are critical. And I just overlay really on top of it. So I see people trying to copy us and I see them doing it wrong. We have a patent, but it's impossible to enforce because you don't know what the hell they're doing when they hide in the stall with a computer. It cost us $7 million in 35 years to get where we are. Plus, we work harder. We go to a sale. We look at every single horse. We don't pick out 5 from the pedigree in the catalog. If there's 600 horses, we evaluate 600 horses. So we spend more money. We work harder. We do more time. We do more technologies. We have some of the very best traditional expertise. That ain't easy to copy.
So, Jeff, there's this notion that Malcolm Gladwell sort of coined. I think he didn't come up with it, but he spoke about it in his book called the 10,000 hour rule. that's how much deliberate practice it takes to become world-class at something.
I think it's true for us.
That's what I'm hearing.
I tell people it took 35 years and $7 million to become an overnight success. This year, too, I have the best track record in the industry, and I'm resented for it because I don't follow a lot of what I'm supposed to do, and I don't go to any cocktail parties, or I don't do dinner with clients. I don't do any of that. But yes, it took my technician and me and the people around me. We lost money for 20 years before the thing popped, and we reached a critical mass. And we just got so good at what we did. We got good at the traditional looking at horses and managing them. We got good at the technique of getting the data. We got databases that were big enough and rigorous enough. Some other people, I saw a couple of guys, he was trying to do hundreds of horses, but he's using all kinds of different vets to take the data with the ultrasound. It's not reproducible. They don't have enough experience. They go out there, they read the paper we published in a refereed scientific journal, and then they try and copy it. They just can't. It doesn't work. There's no shortcut to this.
Well, in terms of the data that you're collecting, I'm curious how genetic sequencing comes into play. Can we identify these genetic markers for speed, for strength, for these things?
There's a couple of companies out there that say they have the genetic marker, the speed marker, or the distance marker. What they really have mainly is a myostatin inhibitor marker. And myostatin inhibitor gene is responsible for a disease in humans that can make a baby look like a muscled up weightlifter. It's precocious muscle development. But, and then they're selling that as the be all and end all. And for a lot of reasons, it's shabby methodology. But the main problem is that it's one marker or two markers. And a racehorse I think it's like each one's like a symphony, the good ones. There's a million notes that have to go together. Most of the ways they go together are noise. But there's also more than one symphony out there. You got a lot of variables that have to fit together. So you're not going to get one genetic marker that shows all that. Just so that they're going after a speed gene, that would be like going after a health gene. Instead, what you want to know is there a gene for breast cancer? Is there a gene for Lou Gehrig's disease? So I have a database big enough. I can go back through it, and I know all kinds of physical variables like the thickness of the left ventricle's septal wall muscle. And the muscle type of that, and and lungs and spleen diameters, all kinds of stuff that relate to development. So I went out, I found markers to all these things that we've already proven are powerful. So it's a series of markers. Now, it isn't even on the market yet. I have not put it on the market, and I may never put it on the market. I may keep it for myself. But it's nothing like what's being out there and advertised. But no, I didn't stop. I am constantly asking questions, looking at the data, and there are always surprises. Nature's fascinating.
So with all this proprietary data and methodology that you've built over the years, all this money you've spent, why not use your own capital or raise some capital and buy up some of these promising racehorses yourself? Why not get in the game?
That's a good question. For one thing, along the way, I had to have clients. The racehorse business is Damon Runyon stuff. I mean, there's a lot of crooks. They're very suspicious. They didn't want you buying horses and competing with them. So during the phases of research in early days when I needed guys who could spend $30 million a year, I needed them. And now I have some loyalty to them. I don't just pull out from them. But yes, I think that's where we're headed. We're finally getting to the point where we can say, okay, we've gotten champions we've made millions of dollars for all our major clients. It's time it's our turn.
Oh, okay. So that might be around the corner.
Might be.
Interesting. So I'm wondering how applicable this kind of big data is to predicting human athletic performance. I mean, if it works for animals, why not humans? So have you thought about exploring whether big data like this at the biological level can predict the most talented elite athletes?
Well, the thing is that elite athletes often have a learned component to what they're doing. The reason it works for racehorses is that a lot of what we're looking at is autonomic. The gait, a horse has to get up within 20 minutes and keep up with the herd. So a lot of the gait, the way they run is autonomic. That's extremely important. And there's very little learned component. Even when they get racing speed, their breathing is controlled by the gait. When their forelegs come down and push against their chest, they exhale. And when the forelegs go up in the air, they inhale. So it's like shot put or it's like rowing. When we were doing early work with the Olympic Committee, our biggest successes were things like this that were biomechanical, like the bobsled or the shot put or rowing or swimming. Like tennis, there's so much about the learned component. I'm not sure you can predict any of that. But meanwhile, the United States Olympic Committee, its research, its scientists, its coaches, they are on top of a lot of the stuff for humans. They have made enormous strides in all kinds of sports. And the young swimmers, they can take the time of a young swimmer going 25 yards and tell you whether he's likely to be able to go 100 yards in competition with Olympic swimmers when he's 4 years older. The way he the splits of his 25 yards, how he fatigues through the 25 yards in time. It'll follow a logarithmic function, and you can extrapolate that. And then if you have enough data, you can know how to move it up for 4 years of strength and training, and you can see pretty much accurately what his time will be. I do that with young racehorses. I can take a young racehorse in his first race, and then as a 2-year-old, and then 8 months later at a 1.25 miles in the Kentucky Derby, I can tell you within 3/5 of a second what his time will be. And I do it.
Well, your story is essentially the Moneyball of horse racing.
Yeah, except we started before Moneyball. We started in the 70s.
You started light years before Moneyball. I mean, you essentially used data as this competitive advantage to see these patterns that everyone else was missing. So what kind of background and training do you need to spot those patterns? Because one usually thinks of a data scientist as having a background with a pretty advanced computer programming and statistical skill set. Did you just learn that on your own? Did you pick it up?
Yes, I learned computer programming on my own, and I programmed my own stuff right down to machine language. I was obsessive compulsive. I say we don't have the A team, we have the type A team. I went to General Motors mechanics school at night during my senior year at Harvard and got degrees in mechanics and I solved a lot of our problems from what I knew about how engines work and all that kind of stuff. I think I say there's a difference between learners and thinkers. I think you need to it's good to be pre-med. You need the basics, serious training in some sciences and statistics. And after that, you need to be curious and think. You can't just read all the papers and apply it all. You have to, half the papers I read, I find what I think are methodological flaws in them. They're not really proving what they think, or they're not answering questions they think they're answering, or they should have asked, or whatever. I just think you have to be, that kind of person is a contrarian. You have to be curious, and you have to be willing to go out on a limb. You look silly. You have to be willing to look silly for a couple of years, pursuing stuff. So many people, they know so much, but they never seem to question. They never seem to question a lot of where the hell it came from.
Well, how do you define success? Because now that you've nailed the Triple Crown, does that become the new benchmark, and anything short of that leaves you wanting more?
No, I guess it's your percentages is one thing. We haven't just the Triple Crown. We've had like 5 world champions, and we've had the leading breeder. We took a guy who was a breeder, and we got him an inexpensive group of broodmares and made him the leading breeder in the United States 2 years in a row. I just think we can improve our odds. That's about it. And we can learn new things. The DNA, there's still so much, for every question you answer, there's 4 more that it raises. There's so much left to learn. As far as the definition of success, for me, I don't want on my tombstone what kind of car I drove or what was in my portfolio. I'd like to be known as an innovator. I'm still not that well known in the racehorse business, believe it or not. I'm at a major auction right now, and they're spending a median of $500,000 a yearling and on, hundreds of horses. And 90% of them, you couldn't give it to me. I wouldn't pay to train it. So it's not like my stuff's out there and accepted. So that's the other thing. For me, success would be better percentages, and I'd like a little recognition in the industry.
Well, do you think picking that Triple Crown was a once-in-a-lifetime event, or are you thinking, I'm going to do that again and again?
Well, I don't know if I can do it again and again, but I certainly come close 30 times already. I've had 30 there's the grade 1, there's 100 races a year called grade 1, like the Kentucky Derby and the World Championships a year. Most people win 1 or 2 in a lifetime. We've done like 37 in the last 5 or 6 years. And we've had, like I say, 3 or 4 world champions. We've had the leading breeder twice. We've had the leading owner 3 times. We're knocking at the door on all this. The Triple Crown, there's so much luck that goes into that. But I think if I live long enough, I think I'll do it again.
You seem incredibly happy and passionate in this line of work. You figured out how to blend your love of horses with your interest in big data in a career that's spanned decades now. Many people, as you may know, spend their entire lives searching for work that's meaningful and fulfilling, and they never find it. You found it pretty early on in life. You feel lucky?
Yeah, I've had a good run. I do feel lucky. But talking to my daughter, my son, my daughter just went to college. I have a daughter who just went to college, and she's trying to decide what to do. And she wants to help people and this, that, and the other. And she wanted to get all A's, and she was going to kill herself. And I said, well, I did that, and I think that was a mistake. So my advice to her was find something you love and get really good at it. The sooner you do that, the happier you'll be. And I think that's kind of what happened for me. I sloshed around, and finally I said, oh, the hell with it. I love horses. I'm going to do that. That didn't exactly go over big with my parents.
Well, it's not a lawyer. It's not necessarily immediately obvious how you leverage the law degree or the business degree, but you found an incredible career out of it. The name of this podcast is The Art of Excellence. I'm still learning myself what excellence means to me. What's your definition of it?
Wow. Well, that's not easy. I think if I was a painter, the way I describe it is you really need to pay your dues, do your homework, learn the technical stuff. Get good at the tech. I think there was some musician who said that. You really have to learn your instrument. Then forget all that shit and just wail. And I think that's it. I think the two definitions are, one, you have to get really good at what you do, and there has to be love in there somewhere. If you won't be good. If it's not you, it won't be that good, no matter how rigorous you are. And if you just love it and you won't put in the time to learn the instrument, then it won't be that hot either. So I would describe excellence as, I guess, learning your instrument and then forgetting all that shit and wailing.
I like that. Jeff, this has been an absolute pleasure. From a professor throwing a horse book at your desk at Harvard to all of a sudden becoming the first scout to ever predict the Triple Crown. Man, what a career. And thank you so much for being part of the show.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to talk about it.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can subscribe to the show at iTunes, Stitcher, and theartofexcellence.com. I've got one small favor to ask. If you like the show, please take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. I'll see you next time.